All right. Hi, everyone. We
Hello.
are going to give everybody just a few minutes to jump on. We have a live broadcast happening now. I am Hannah. I'm with Family Source Consultants. Although now I obviously work with the organization, I started as a surrogate myself. So last year, I delivered a healthy baby in July of 2022. That's been my experience. I have with me today two current surrogates, and we are going to answer all sorts of fun questions about surrogacy and what it's really like to be a surrogate. Jasmine, you want to start by introducing yourself?
Yes, I'm Jasmine. I'm in Kansas. This is my first surrogacy, and I went through Family Source, of course. It was definitely a learning curve going into it, not knowing what to expect, but I want to do it all over again. I'm already ready. I just finished my first journey in May. I gave birth to a little baby boy, and it was definitely a very quick labor and went very smoothly.
And Jasmine, so this will be fun for anybody who watched our last Q&A. Jasmine was there, and then she went into labor. You went into labor that night, right?
Yeah, so I was 39 weeks and 5 days, or the end of 4 days, and then we were really worried. I'm like, "Hopefully, I make it through the live without going into labor," and then that night, going to bed, my water broke.
Amazing. We love it. And I think you jinxed yourself because on the live, you were like, this baby's not coming anytime
Yeah,
soon. And
and I
there
was
you are.
fully phased. At that time, I thought I was at a 4. I might have already been at a 6. I'm not sure where the progression changed, but it all went very quickly.
That's amazing. Well, yeah, we want to catch up with you and get kind of the full story of all the excitement you've been up to in the last month. And then, Brittany, you're at a very different part of your journey. So, can you introduce yourself?
So I'm Brittany. I live in Ohio, and I am at the very beginning of my pregnancy. I actually just had a doctor's appointment today. I'm like almost 9 weeks, so the opposite end of from where you're at. But everything is going great, and yeah, I'm excited to finally be where I'm at. You kind of feel like it's not going to happen. But then now I kind of feel like everything has happened so quick when I really look back at it. So
Right, and I feel like
definitely
you
just
just
like
transferred.
taking it day by day and appreciating every part of the process for what it is and where I'm at with it. So
Yeah, I think both ends of the spectrum are pretty fun and exciting for different reasons.
uh-huh.
We will totally get into that. So this is designed to be definitely more casual than our typical webinars, kind of just a Q&A. And for folks who are watching, you have the opportunity to ask questions in the chat, and we will be able to see your comments and ask them live as well. So I have some questions prepared, but feel free to jump in for anybody watching if you do have a question, and we will do our best to get to it. So Brittany, how did you decide you wanted to be a surrogate in the whole first place?
So it's honestly been something that I have thought about for a really long time. I do have two kids of my own, and one of them is almost an adult. I have a 17-year-old and a 9-year-old. But after I had my son, my pregnancy, I enjoyed it. Like, I know that's something a lot of people can't relate to, but then there's a lot of people who can relate to that. And I just, like I said, I enjoyed it. It was kind to me for the most part. And I just kind of like thought back then, like, man, this is something that I would like to do for someone else. And being young then, I just never really followed through with it. And throughout my life, I was never really like led to do it until like kind of like last year, really. I was like, okay, if this is something I'm going to do, like, I probably need to look into it. And I actually had a friend who, I know I'm kind of skipping ahead, but I had a friend who donated eggs through Family Source. And that was just kind of my like sign, I think, like, hey, you should really look into doing this. Here's a great agency. She had nothing but great things to say about Family Source. And so I kind of took that as my sign to really kind of start to look into it. But yeah, I just think that being a mother or a father is something that's just incredible. And I think being able to, you know, like being able to do that for someone was just something that I think it's one of the best things I'll ever do in my life. One of my greatest accomplishments, in my opinion. So it's kind of something I've thought about for a really long time. So I'm just happy to finally, you know, be doing it and be a part of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it sounds like it's been a long time coming.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I've definitely spoken with others who have been just thinking about it for a really long time. So it definitely takes a lot of like courage to really jump in and say, okay, I'm doing it now. But
Right.
And I think it's kind of like there are a lot of resources out there, but there's almost too many resources. And when you do kind
Where
of
do I start?
yeah, it's like it gets overwhelming. And so a personal reference from someone that I trust was like a huge thing for me, that made me feel comfortable, because I had looked into it a few times and I'm like, this place and that place, and you know, it was overwhelming. And you really, it is such a huge thing. You don't know, like, you know, the internet, everything's on the internet. You're like, what's real, what's not, what can I
Is this
trust?
a scam?
So like I said, that personal reference for me was a big, like, kind of like push to really move forward with it. So
yeah, that's very helpful. So Jasmine, you didn't know anybody from Family Source, or did you prior? How did you find
So I
FSC?
can relate with Brittany with a sign, because so initially I had looked into surrogacy in 2020 after I gave birth to my daughter, but the one place that I had applied with, a family member actually went through them. I applied with them and they're like, hey, you have to be done breastfeeding. Well, I was 3 months postpartum, so that wasn't an option for me because I knew I wanted to breastfeed. So I ended up going to 15 months postpartum. And then I started looking more into it again. And some of the agencies weren't getting back to me, or it'd be a couple months, or it'd just be radio silent. So I'm like, well, maybe it's not my time. I mean, I kind of just put on the back burner, and then I'm big on social media, and I came across a TikTok of someone who was doing egg donation with Family Source. And I'm like, you know what? This is a sign. It's popping up on my stuff, you know, like 8:30 at night, let's apply, you know. 9 a.m. the next morning, I'm getting a call like, hey, you want to jump on a Zoom for an initial phone call? I'm like, yeah. And then that's where it all started.
That's amazing. Yeah, I had a very similar, I filled out my application also at like 9 p.m. from my bed on my phone, and had a very similar experience with that. So that's, yes, I think that's a pretty common experience that a lot of surrogates have, where we're just like, you know what, let's just fill this out and see what happens. So that's perfect. So Brittany, has it been what you expected, or what surprised you about surrogacy so far?
I didn't have a lot of expectation going into it, just because I didn't really know anything about it. So I would say that just what I had made up in my mind off of my own assumptions, the process was longer than I initially expected, but now that I have been a part of it and I understand the steps and everything that's involved, I feel like it's been not short, but in the whole scheme of things, it's not like it's been this long drawn out thing. Like I said, until you're really involved with it and you kind of understand what all goes into matching the surrogate with the intended parent and all of the different steps along with that, I would say based on what I learned from my caseworker in the beginning, it has been what I expected. But what I had made up in my own head, it took a little bit longer. And not that that's a bad thing, you know, like I said, it was just kind of, before you're involved with it, you honestly have no idea, you know. And I find that a lot. A lot of people, I post a little bit on my personal social media, and I get a ton of, I spend probably an hour every day answering questions to like different people on my personal social media and just like, well, what about this? And like, how does this work? And like, a lot of people are just like so intrigued by it. And so like, you know, they tell me like, I've never known someone who has done this. It's just so interesting, you know? And, but yeah, I would say I've had a very pleasant experience. You know, like I said, going into it, I had never known a surrogate. You know, I had obviously with the internet, you know, I've seen video TikToks and, you know, different things of surrogates online. And so you kind of get an idea, but, you know, going into it, I really was kind of clueless, you know, about any part of it. I just knew I wanted to do it and I was going to do whatever I had to take to do it, you know? So it was just kind of like, do this. Okay. Do this. Okay. You know, and I don't feel like any part of it is unrealistic or negative. Like there's no part that I look back on and I'm like, oh, that part would keep me from doing this again, you know? And so it wasn't exactly what I expected, but it has been a pleasant experience.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Jasmine, did you have a similar experience? Or were you particularly surprised by anything?
So honestly, the only thing for me was how long it took. I didn't know what I was getting into, you know. I did know one person who went through surrogacy, but she kept miscarrying, so she didn't continue her journey. So there wasn't a lot I could ask her because she didn't follow through the whole journey, you know. So really just the wait and the time in between each step. But every time I hit a new step or got a text or call from my manager or the clinic, I got so excited. I'm like, okay, what's next?
I know.
Yeah, there's a lot of milestones to hit before you even get pregnant.
Right.
It is very much a hurry up and wait game.
Definitely.
Sure. Brittany, what other questions are you getting from people that you're answering regularly?
I think the biggest question I get is, you know, is the baby mine at all? Because a lot of people, I think once they realize gestational surrogate, they then like it clicks like, oh, okay, it makes sense. But that is the number one question I get would be about the baby. You know, people say, well, is it related to you at all? And do you worry about being attached to the baby once you give birth? And I feel like that is probably the number one question that I get from like, especially other mothers, people who have been through a pregnancy and have been through a birth and kind of understand how like intensive an experience that is.
Right.
You know, and really kind of the ins and outs too, like, do you have to go there to have the baby? Do they come here? You know, because my intended parents are in Texas and I'm in Ohio. So obviously we're not close as far as distance goes. So really just kind of like, really a lot of the questions remind me of like the questions I had at the beginning, you know, just kind of like the things that you don't really think about, but then they're kind of a big thing, you know. The matching, a lot of people will ask me like, oh, well, how did you pick, you know? And I will say like the one thing I always say about Family Source is that you guys really, as a surrogate, I feel like keep my feelings and my, you know, needs and wants always, I feel like, are taken care of and in the foreground. They're never pushed to the side. I never feel like I have to make a decision that I'm not okay with. And that's kind of one thing I have really liked. Even in the beginning with like my matching process, there were some things, some preferences I had that, you know, they told me, they're like, this might keep you from matching, you know, it might take a little longer for you to match. Like as far as like vaccinations and things like that go. And I was okay with that. Because I figured if it was something I was meant to be, that what I was meant to do, I mean, you know, that the right people would come along. And I would say that beginning matching part was my not most frustrating, but the part of the process that took a long time that I didn't expect it to. You know, because you're kind of like, hey, like I'm putting myself out there. I'm willing to do this. Like, why isn't anyone picking me? You know, not, but it wasn't really like that. It was just because you guys are so mindful of only, you know, only saying like, hey, what do you think of these people? Because they match everything that is important to me and my values, you know. But yeah, a lot of the questions are like little things like that. I get a lot of silly questions too, but for the most part, it's about the baby, the delivery. Oh, do you have to fly there? And I'm like, no, I don't. I get to go to my regular doctor. And a lot of people are surprised by, I guess the freedom that you have as the surrogate, because you do get to see your own doctor. You do kind of get to still be in control of your birth plan, and like that's the biggest thing I tell people. I'm like, from the beginning, you get to like put all your stuff out there, and this is me and this is how I want to do it, and they will find you someone who falls in line with that. So yeah, I've gotten every question, I feel like, even like really off the wall ones where I'm just like, no, that's not how it works.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I think there's just a lot of like misconceptions about how it actually works. And I love that. Like, I love being able to kind of clear up some of those and make it like less mysterious for people. But yes, so now, Jasmine, you've been on the other side now of it. So the question that I think we all get asked the most is about the giving up the baby. So can you talk a little bit about your experience with that specifically?
So when I went into labor, my intended parents still weren't here. They're in Texas and I'm in Kansas. And my water broke at midnight. So I'm calling my intended mother and I'm like, okay, my water just broke. I know you're 9 hours away. I'm on my way to the hospital. She's like, okay, we're getting in the car. Bags are already packed. And they ended up not making it, which is one thing I was worried about because that's a really special moment for them, especially. So my intended father, he does have a daughter. She's older, though. She's 11 or 12. But my intended mother does not have any biological children. And so personally, that was something that would have been really important, that I would think she would want to be there for. But so I was really worried about the whole time. I'm like, they're pretty far, they're driving. I'm like, I just really hope they make it, but they ended up not making it. So, and my labor was pretty quick too. So I had baby by myself for about 6 hours. So he was in care by me. And then, so I was able to breastfeed him and take care of him. But I mean, everyone thought that was going to be the hardest part for me was, letting him latch and then having all that alone time with him, skin to skin. I got to cut the cord and they're like, you're not going to want to let go, But I knew mentally going into this what it was, and that's one thing you have to be prepared for from the get-go before you even match, because once you do match, that's, that I would think the intended parents, their hopes are higher, they're on to the next step of becoming parents. So I definitely knew I wasn't going to become attached. But before my dad passed away, he was pretty set on me not being a surrogate. He was so worried. He's like, I don't want you to get attached because I only have one kid right now. And he wanted a lot of grandchildren. So he thought I was going to want more or want to keep the baby. And I'm like, that's not how it works.
Right. And that's not how you were feeling necessarily either. Right. So yeah, I've definitely had family and friends who are like I understand the concern and that people are worried about you and your feelings. And that's such a nice thing to have that support and community. But, sometimes that's hard when you're like, no, seriously, it's going to be fine. And
I'm telling you, I promise it's okay.
Yeah. And it sounds like it was in the end for you.
Yes. And I was really grateful that I was trusted to be in care of him while they're on their way here. And I got to spend that time with him. I just carried him for 9 months,
Yeah.
So it was really nice.
Yeah. And it is set up so different from the beginning. Like it's always coined as like being extreme babysitting. And that's really what it feels like. Like I cared, of course, and wanted the best for them. But like part of the appeal to me was not having to do the newborn stage again, right? Like I've done it with my own kids. I'm good on that part.
Like I love being pregnant, but here's your baby.
Recovery is tough anyway, but I would argue that it is easier when like you're sleeping, like you just get to
Right.
sleep. And it's really kind of nice. So that's good that you kind of had a similar experience. And I know, Brittany, you said before we jumped on that this pregnancy, you're not feeling awesome. So how has it differed from your other pregnancies?
Yeah, I mean, I did have some morning sickness with both of my own kids. So I kind of went into it expecting it, but then part of me was also like, oh, well, people say it's different, like maybe I won't, and it really hasn't been anything too terrible. So in the whole scheme of things, I can't complain about it. But it is nice because both of my kids are older, and so and now especially it's summer break, so I'm like, hey, need a nap, I'm laying down, and it does make it a little easier, as far as that goes, because with my daughter, obviously I was taking care of my son, and you know how it is when you have a little one around and then you're also going through a pregnancy, and like you were saying with the wanting to be pregnant, but here's your baby, that was kind of me. I was like, I've been having this, like, not even baby fever. I was just like, yeah, and it would be so fun to be pregnant again. But like, I am legitimately fine with the two kids that I have, the story that I have right now, and so that was kind of another thing for me. I'm like, okay, well, this is like the perfect way to have both. I get to be pregnant again, but then, and I know that sounds weird, but I am very content with my two kids. And so it's just like, this is the perfect solution. I can be pregnant, do something awesome for, people who need it and want it. And like my IPs, like they've been on a very long journey. I think everyone, once they get to the point of a surrogate, has been through, kind of a long journey. And it feels really nice to know, that you're kind of that like light at the end of the tunnel for someone, for something that we've all experienced. We all have our own kids and understand like that feeling, so it's like the next best thing, being able to give that to someone.
Yeah, that's great. So do you talk with your IPs regularly, or what does that relationship look like?
I do. So, obviously you have to get to a certain point in the process before you have that kind of personal line of communication. And that was something I was honestly really looking forward to, just because I feel like getting to know them has, I wouldn't say helped me with the process, but it has made it nice to kind of have that friendship and that bond with them. I feel like, I don't know, it's like it creates a different kind of bond with the baby, because like I talk to the baby and I talk to them about, talk to the baby about the parents, or, they'll tell me like, oh, tell him this or tell him that, and so they both are very busy with work. One of them, they both kind of work remotely all the time. And so we talk as much as we can. We video call during doctor's appointments. And I take like videos of the ultrasound and stuff and send to them. And so I would say, are as close as you could be, just regarding kind of comparing to other people's experiences and stuff. And I was honestly fine. That was one thing I was okay with. I was okay with no communication or lots of communication. But I am grateful for the relationship that I have with them. We did get to see each other. I went to Texas the week before my transfer, and that was the first time we met in person. We went out to eat. We happened to all love food, so we went out to eat and had a big meal. And then when I went back for my transfer, they drove me around for my appointments, and we kind of hung out again. And so it has been very nice to kind of have a constant communication. And I have very good support. But that's just kind of like another level of support. It makes it,
it's just different.
It's already, it just makes it different. It takes on a different feeling when you kind of have that relationship with them as well.
Yeah. And I think that's something for folks to think about before, because it's a match point, right? Is what do you What are you looking for in intended parents? What do you want that relationship to look like? Because it does look different for everyone. So for me, I knew that like humor was really important to me because honestly, like surrogacy is so wonderful and like it's a miracle really. And it's also kind of like silly in a lot of ways. Like there's some really like absurd things that you're like, this is an odd kind of situation to be in. So we can like, laugh together about those kind of weirder parts I thought was important to me. I definitely had that in my intended parents, and we had a wonderful time while I was pregnant. So, but again, some people are like, nope, I don't need that kind of relationship. That's not something I need. That's not for me. So it's definitely something to think about. We have a question from somebody watching. And again, we do have a few minutes left in the broadcast. So folks can definitely keep asking questions if you've got them. You're good. Right? We all have like children and animals in the background, so it's to be expected. But Jasmine, can you talk about, so the question is, did you find your cravings during surrogacy to be very different than your children's pregnancies?
No. So even though my daughter's pregnancy was night and day from the surrogacy pregnancy because I was sick with my daughter and not sick at all with the surrogacy, the cravings were the same. I have a big sweet tooth as it is anyways, and I am still on chocolate milk like nobody's business. I love milk as it is anyways, but like I go through so much milk because I love chocolate milk. But that was like my number one thing really. In the beginning for a little bit it was pickles. And then the whole time was just chocolate milk, and it has not gone away.
But you're also like pumping right now, so I feel like that chocolate milk has got to be.
Yes, I feel like I could just drink a freaking ocean, which obviously that's makes no sense because it dehydrates you more. But like, I just feel like I could drink and drink and drink, and I'm just so thirsty.
That's amazing. Yeah. Brittany, have you had different cravings specifically?
I don't know. I haven't really had anything. I would say my craving is not specific, but it's like when I want something, like I have found myself like getting up and driving 25 minutes to go pick up certain foods that I want. Like ice cream has been a thing for me. Like I don't get up and leave. Like I'm the mom that's like, we have food at home kind of person. And like I have been getting up and getting all kinds of stuff lately. I mean, I went to Dairy Queen at like 10 o'clock at night, like 2 weeks ago. But I haven't had any like super specific cravings yet. My daughter, I was obsessed with all things lemon. So like lemon water and like lemon heads. I was making lemon bars all the time. I was using lemon soap. Like, so I have in my previous pregnancies had cravings, but this time nothing yet. But I have been ridiculously hungry. I don't know if it's the hormone meds or what it is, but like when I'm hungry, I have to eat, and I'm hungry all the time. So there's no lack of calories happening.
Brittany, we're the opposites there. I am horrible about, you know what, that does sound good. I'll cook tomorrow. And in the beginning, it was Texas Roadhouse for me. Like I wanted Texas Roadhouse all the time.
Yeah.
That sounds delicious. I felt like my pregnancy cravings during surrogacy were stronger. I don't think it's related to anything, but like I didn't have different ones. I just like you said, Brittany, like I needed it.
Yeah.
Like I did a U-turn to get to restaurants that I drive past just because I was like, wait, I need that Panda Express like immediately. Yeah. Oh, that's real. Yeah, I get that. So we are almost at the end of our time. So again, if folks have questions, feel free to put them in. But I want to know from both Jasmine and Brittany, what advice would you give to anybody who's considering being a surrogate? They're kind of on the fence. They're not totally sure. What advice would you give to them?
Honestly, I would just say go into this with patience. I know it's very exciting. Anytime I got a call or email, I was so excited to know if there's something else I get to do. But definitely have patience. Going into this, I did not know how long it would take to get pregnant, but personally for me, it was 9 months before we transferred the embryo. So there is time it takes for sure.
Yeah.
But definitely worth it.
Definitely. Yeah. I think and it varies, right? So I've heard of folks who had to wait a full year. And then in my experience, I was matched in August and I was pregnant by the end of November. So like it just depends on a lot of different factors, but knowing going into it that it might take a while and that once you fill out that application, you're not going to be pregnant the next day, I think is really important to keep in mind. That's a great point.
Right. One more thing.
Oh, please.
And I know this isn't the part anyone wants to hear. It's the hard part. But going into this, I didn't realize it was such a big thing. Just because you transfer doesn't mean you will end up pregnant. Luckily, my first transfer did take, but I've learned a lot through this first journey, and it's not always the case.
Yeah. Yeah. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're out of the game. Like a lot of folks just jump right back into their next cycle and do another transfer, but that part's very hard. I know it's similarly for me, like I didn't know anything about IVF before I became a surrogate. Like I knew there were injections involved, but like it's like months of medication that
I thought it was never gonna end.
I know.
Because
That's where I'm at right now.
Everybody's like right in the middle of it. Yeah. Brittany, what advice would you give to folks who are considering becoming a surrogate?
That is definitely one thing I was going to say is just to be patient. Even when it seems frustrating or there are setbacks, like I had some setbacks in my med calendar. And you know, I did wait. So I started in June. It was November until I matched. And it wasn't that I had a lot of couples presented to me. Full transparency, I didn't have a COVID vaccine. And I was told up front that would be something that, and it wasn't necessarily the parents, it was just that at that time, a lot of clinics still had that as a requirement.
Right.
And so intended parents with clinics that required a COVID vaccine is just an automatic, out of my file, not even a possibility. And so I did get a little discouraged during the matching process because I would just be sitting around and I'm like, there's no one, like, I'm checking my email and I'm like, no one wants me, like, but it was, like I said, that was the factor that kind of did that. I do not regret that at all. I'm glad that I stayed a personal advocate for myself and what I believe in. I've learned in the support group, some people have changed things like vaccines, diets, things like that. And they end up saying that they wish they would have just stuck to what their personal beliefs are. And so I am glad I did that. So patience is definitely a thing. Like I said, it took me till November. I'm beyond thrilled with my couple. So I think it was all meant to be anyways. And then you get to the meds and you start that and your cycle isn't doing what they want it to, or, this comes up or something else comes up. And I remember telling one of my friends, I'm like, I've never cried because I didn't get my period before. Like,
yes.
It's like, I'm like,
want it, it's not coming.
I know. And so I would say also patience, ask all the questions that you want, whether it's to someone who is a surrogate. Reach out to an agency and ask a ton of questions. You're not obligated to do it just because you are asking questions and have applied. Like you said, Family Source responded so quick. And so I knew it was a possibility for me within a day or two of applying. And then it was just kind of like really figuring out how it worked. But I would just say, like, aside from being patient, staying true to yourself, how you want things to go. I think that there is a match for everyone. And leaning on the support group is huge. I've obviously never worked with another agency, but that's one of the huge things I tell people about Family Source. I'm like, there's a Facebook group and like everyone is in there and you can ask these like off the wall questions.
About, it's just us surrogates. So
it's just surrogates in this Facebook group and it's amazing.
Yeah, it really is. And just because like the things with the meds, like, like you said, I knew nothing about IVF. I had a whole new respect for anyone I know who has gone through IVF after going through this, and I can't imagine there's already the emotional toll, and then knowing everything else that goes into it, you're just like, wow, and it is all worth it in the end. But I think getting that transparency up front and really knowing what you're going to go through. I could think of a million questions I didn't ask in the beginning just because I had no idea.
Didn't know what to ask, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why you got the staff to help. So, right.
Yeah. And it's been, I have never felt like I've had a question for more than 5 or 6 hours and someone from Family Source didn't answer it.
Yeah.
My caseworkers I had to change, but both of them have been awesome. The support group has been awesome. And there's really a lot of people out in the world that have been surrogates. You kind of like see that once you do it, someone's like, oh, my aunt did that, or oh, my sister has done that, or you know, so it's like its own little community of people that like to be pregnant, and you know, it's kind of cool to really like kind of see it from the other side now. And now I'm like, I wish I would have done it sooner. So that's a piece of advice I would say if you're thinking about being a surrogate, and you feel like you're in a good place in your life to do it, go for it. Because like I look at it and I'm like, well, I would have done this like 6 or 7 times if I would have done it, you know, a while ago.
I think I jumped on the gun
pushing senior citizen age over here, but you know, I went through it with no problems. I thought for sure I'm gonna get denied. I'm too old, you know, this, that, you know, and a lot of people think they won't get approved, but I'm like, you never know until you try, you know, and that's kind of how I feel about me. I mean, I'm not old, but you know, I'm 38, so I have had people say that to me, like, aren't you too old to do something like that? And I was like, would you say that to me if I was pregnant with my own kid?
Right.
It's true. Yeah. I think people would be surprised at how like the requirements, and that I mean, yes, they are strict in some ways. Like you can't just let anybody carry a baby for somebody else, but age really or like even if you have your tubes tied like that, you can still be a surrogate. So there's some really interesting criteria, I think. So
yeah,
and I told people, I'm like, just mention it to your OB. Like your OB is gonna know if it's something that you would qualify to do, because that's what I did. I just like scheduled an appointment, went to my doctor, and I was just like, hey, like I applied to do this, like would you approve me? And she's like, yeah, you know. And so I just would say go for it, ask questions, be patient. It's worth it.
I think that's all true. And we are here as resources for folks if you do have questions. I know Jasmine and Brittany and I all love helping and answering questions and getting more people
interested. I love talking about it so much.
I know
it get annoying.
Yeah. So if you want to talk about it, we are happy to do that. But I think we'll wrap up on that note. So thank you so much, Jasmine and Brittany. I really appreciate your insight. And we'll check in with you again in a similar scenario next month.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.